What is up, everybody? This is Mason with the Duelist 101 podcast, and of course, as always, I'm joined by Zach. How you doing, bud?
Man, I'm doing pretty well. I'm excited for today's episode. It'll be fun.
It is going to be fun, guys. We realized something as we were going through the topics of all the different monsters and special summoning techniques, and it was something brought up by our little brother actually. Is that we never actually covered what the game board looks like, which, as you can imagine, is pretty important, especially in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! So,
Just a little bit, little
just,
bit.
yeah, a little bit. I mean, I know whenever I started, Zach had the time of his life, I'm sure, trying to explain to me where every different thing was.
Man, let me tell you, it was a blast.
Something.
But EDO Pro makes everything so much easier.
You know what? Yes, it does. Yes, it does. Which, speaking of, is a great way to learn the game. Go download EDO Pro. Go find it. It's worth it. I promise.
That's great.
All right. So today, guys, we are talking about some of the fundamentals, like what the game board looks like, what types of cards are out there, what is a pretty good ratio on how to build a deck. What are the different kinds of decks? We cover a lot of these different things to try to make life a little bit easier on you guys if you're beginning or if you just need that reminder. So, Zach, any words before we kick it off?
Let's do it. I'm excited.
All right, let's do it. All right, guys. Like we said, we are gonna start this thing off by discussing the game board layout. So, Zach, you want to take that one for us?
Sure, I can do that. So, first things first, that is important for this is where you can get something that can help be a visual assistance to this, more than just us trying to tell you what in the world a game board looks like. But we'll get to that more here in a moment. Those playmats that do make the visual easier, that's the technical name. They're playmats because they're mats that you play on.
Hey, genius.
Right. So when we're doing that, what we are going to do is, let me back that up. With playmats, they show up most often in structure decks, and you can get nicer ones and everything like that. You can get them just kind of custom, whatever artwork you want. But the most general one that tells you about everything, those can be found just in structure decks, which you can go to Walmart, Target, whatever, and just buy one of those. And that'll give you your sort of introductory deck. So on the game board, we know that there's a couple different types of cards. We have monsters, spells, and traps. Right, and when you're playing the game of Yu-Gi-Oh, you need to make sure that you put each of those types of cards in the right place. Right, so on each game board, we have 5 monster zones, just regular monster zones. And this mattered much more during Master Rule 4, which actually just finished up, and now we're in Master Rule 5. So we can just think of these as monster zones. Right, and then right above those, between the first and third monster zone, and then the third and fifth, we have what's called extra monster zones, which are monster zones designed for a particular card called a link monster. All right, so that's the monster part of the field, and then we have behind the monster zone the spells and traps. So the spell and trap card zone, and there's also 5 of those. But then we wonder, because there is a particular type of spell called a field spell, does that need to go back in the spell and trap zone? And the answer to that is no, they do not. So a field spell actually goes just a little bit off the board, up and to the left of the monster zone. And that kind of makes sense. It's like you're changing the whole layout of the field of play or whatever like that. So you're going to put the field spell off. That's the monster zones. Now, where do you find each type of card is probably a kind of important question. So within that, we have our regular monsters, spells, and traps, just regular stuff that you'll find, not the fusion monsters, not synchro, not XZ, whatever like that. Those are found in the main deck, which is going to be placed to the right of your last spell and trap zone to the right. And that's just your deck. Anytime you see on card text, it's like shuffle your deck or whatever like that. That's what it's talking about. So then on the very opposite side of that, we have what's called the extra deck. And the extra deck is made for monsters that would go in the extra monster zone, right? So with the extra deck like that, that's where all our sort of big time monsters end up going, or monsters that a lot of times in the modern game of Yu-Gi-Oh, unless you're playing very particular types of decks, will be played trying to get to the monsters that are hidden in the extra deck. And then finally, last two pieces of the game board on the right beside the monster zones is the graveyard. So anytime your monster dies in battle or by card effect, or it gets sent to the graveyard or anything like that, it goes to this little zone. It's the graveyard, but what you'll find out as you play the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Is oftentimes monsters, when they go there, are not quite dead. It takes some time, so...
Yes. Some monsters have effects that you can trigger or activate while they're in the graveyard. So that's what he's
yeah,
that's what he means. They are the undead for a hot second.
That's it. And then the last zone to kind of talk about, this one sits right, I believe, right above on a traditional playmat. There's the banish zone, which is when the card text will specifically say banish this card, you'll put it in this zone instead.
Mm-hmm.
And that any type of monster can go in the graveyard and the banish zone. It can be extra deck, it can be regular cards, whatever. So they can both go in the graveyard and banish zone, and sometimes pick up effects based on which zone they're in, based on the card, of course. So that is kind of the idea, and I've started to talk about the different types of cards we have and everything like that. When you're building a deck, Mason, would you like to walk us through talking about what a good ratio is, and then talk about the different types of decks we have?
Yeah, for sure. So, of course, we have three main kinds of cards. We have monsters, we have spells, and we have traps. So a monster normally has this tannish orange color if you're looking at it. And those are either normal monsters or normal effect monsters, right? Any of these extra deck monsters that we've talked about up to this point, the synchros, the XCs, the fusions, we're not referring to those right now. We have normal and or normal effect monsters. And then we have spells. They're like this greenish, like turquoise color. And those are things that you can activate on your turn, depending on the kind of spell that it is. And then we have traps, which you can activate on your opponent's turn, and sometimes your turn, provided, of course, the kind of trap that it is. So the best kind of ratio for these cards is like 2 to 1 to 1, right? Rule of thumb, 40 cards in your deck is a pretty good number. It gives you the best possibility for drawing the cards you need at the right time. And so generally having like 20 total monsters, 10 spells, 10 traps, that's usually a pretty even deck. Now, I will clarify, there are some decks that you will want like more spells or more traps or more monsters. And so the general rule of thumb, like strictly being general, the 2 to 1 to 1 is a pretty good set to help you get a handle on the game starting out. So not every deck has to follow that ratio to a T, right, Zach?
Absolutely, yeah. So that ratio is just kind of a good, super general way to format your deck. A lot like even my favorite deck, the Cubics that I've been working on, like I have 9 actual cubic monsters in it, and then I have 9 danger cards, which helps me get through the deck. But all that to say, total, I have just 18 monsters in that entire deck. So me not pulling a monster isn't just so difficult, like it happens a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So that to say, in a 40 card deck, the 2-to-1 ratio means you'll probably have like 20 monsters and 10 spells and 10 traps.
Right.
But there's some examples of decks that do not run by that at all. There's some that run all the way from like 25 to 30 monsters, even though 30 monsters is a whole lot of monsters to be running, unless it just works for the type of archetype. So one of the examples of a monster heavy deck is the For Hires. And if you talk to anyone that's ever played For Hires or played against it, they will know that the whole idea behind For Hires is just to swarm the field with monsters, and then you're able to link out over and over and just absolutely demolish your opponent out of pure overwhelming amounts of monsters
Yeah.
and things like that. So
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these monster heavy decks almost seem to have like a we're gonna just beat you down strategy. So, and Zach, you just got a copy of a deck that heavily relies on spells.
I did, and I am so excited. You've probably heard about this one from your friends, either still running the format or thinking that it has been in the format for too long. We need to do something to destroy this deck, and that is called Sky Strikers.
Right.
And Sky Strikers is a very control heavy deck, so the goal is to use your opponent's monsters against them. And then by doing so, you're able to appropriately go and absolutely smack your opponent with their own monsters. And it's a lot of fun.
Gotta say, there's nothing more demoralizing than being on the receiving end of that.
And it's awesome with Sky Strikers because they just keep all their resources, so all the spells that they really, really need to have on the field instead of in the graveyard, they're able to constantly bring those back, and it's really fun.
So I'll take this last one just because I like traps. So there are a couple decks that really, really specialize around using traps for just a myriad of different things. And one of the best examples is Altergeist. And one of the more competitive ones you've probably heard of is Eldritch. So both of these try to utilize first, they want to go first so they can lay all their traps down. And then they rely on the fact that by the activation of their traps, they can manipulate the control of the game. So, like with Eldritch, sometimes it might be searching another what they call Eldlixirs, and eventually to get to their quote unquote big golden boy, who is just an absolute force to be reckoned with. Really does a lot for the strategy. And in Altergeist, their main monster is Altergeist Multifaker, who just got unlimited off the ban list. And anytime a trap is activated, you can special summon Multifaker. So it's just really, really hard to keep off the field and have it stay off the field. But both of these trap kinds of decks really try to focus on controlling the game by usually, instead of using like spells to take control of your opponent's monsters, essentially keeping your opponent from being able to utilize the monsters that they as far as their like monster effects, and by triggering their own combo lines through the activation of traps. All of those kinds of cards, the normal monsters, normal effect monsters, actually ritual monsters as well, but we'll save that for another time. Spells and traps, they all go in your main deck, which, like Zach pointed out, sits to the right of the 5 spell and trap card zones. That is your main deck. That is your 40 card deck. That's the one that you're going to be drawing your cards from every time. You're never going to draw your cards from anywhere else. Then we have the extra deck. So like with all these really cool summoning mechanics we've been talking about, like the Synchro, the Xyz, the Fusion, those are going to sit in your extra deck, which is to the left side of the spell and trap zone. And so those, again, just to kind of add in, I know we hadn't talked about it yet, but links will also be featured in the extra deck. So the best way to remember it is any card that's in your extra deck can technically go into your extra monster zone. So your links primarily are what you want to have, because in the past, what they did is they opened up the rest of your monster zones to become extra monster zones. Thus, you could put in these extra deck monsters. That does not mean you cannot put like a fusion monster in the extra monster zone. That's totally okay. You can do that. But generally speaking, the extra deck monsters now can go into any of the main monster zones as long as it's not a link monster. Link monsters have to start, at least, in the extra monster zone. The last kind of deck we have is called a side deck. This is a collection of about 15 cards that you will have with you to take to like tournaments, or if you want to play like best 2 out of 3 with some of your buddies. These are cards that you can replace cards that you currently have in your main deck in order to more effectively compete with exactly what you're facing. So if you've got somebody that plays a lot of monster effects, then you're going to want to have like 3 copies of Dark Ruler No More. All right, that negates your opponent's monster effects for the turn. And so you're going to want to have those so that you can replace some cards that maybe you don't have to have in your current deck to work. So that is the best way I can describe that. A lot of times the side deck is full of equalizers, but I think that sums up just about every kind of deck. Zach, do you want to take us through? I mean, how do you even get started? Like, what are you trying to look for if you just want a deck to have on cardboard, in your hand?
So the biggest thing that you can do is go to Walmart, go to Target, go to whatever store that has some Yu-Gi-Oh cards that's kind of local to you, and go and grab a structure deck, right? And there's actually this fun little rule of thumb in the world of Yu-Gi-Oh, and it's not guaranteed to work every time, but a lot of times you can get a pretty good markup with it, is by going and picking up 3 structure decks. Normally you can have a semi-competitive deck, one that you could at least take to like locals or something like that, maybe with after putting a hand trap or 2 in it or something like that, which we'll get to. Usually you can go and pick up a structure deck, and then a lot of the other boxes that are in the same section of Yu-Gi-Oh cards are normally just kind of random support cards that have been used by some of the top players. And it's kind of just a one-off chance. Like, you might get some of these really cool cards. You'll probably get these particular ones. But the really, really good ones, it's kind of off and on. And so some people will start to go and try to buy single cards just so they don't have to worry about any chances of not getting what they want and just wasting some money. So
Yeah, and those are called booster packs, right? So what's really interesting, there was one time Zach actually managed to pull, I think it was Boral Sword.
that was out of a 10, yeah.
That was out
So
of a 10, yeah.
yeah, so they have booster packs, and those come in different flavors based on whatever deck archetype they're trying to support. But then every year they come out with these golden tens, which are designed to be like the top cards that were used in YCS tournaments over the past year or whatever like that. And I managed to go and off the top pull, I think Boral Sword's like $20 right now, or maybe a little less. So just one card, and I was able to pay back what I paid for the entire 10 because of the value of that one card. So
Yeah, yeah, and like that can happen. And I'll be honest, it's kind of the effect of, you know, monkey must break open the shell in order to eat the food. Um, I'll be
I hadn't
honest,
heard that one before. That's funny.
dude, it's hilarious. Like literally, that's why we still wrap things for Christmas and stuff. Okay, it's because we are all nothing more than primates that are just interested in the gift. And so, yeah, no, it's honestly a lot of fun, and it's actually a really good way if you know that a certain pack has a certain archetype in it.
Yeah.
Like I've been getting really into the Infinity Chasers because I've been looking at building the Witchcrafter archetype. So
Hashtag Infinitrack.
Infinitrax is another one. They also have the Evil Eye archetype, which actually works pretty well with Unchained. So that's fun. The big point of this is that you don't have to use the ratio of like 2 to 1 to 1. If you find a deck that you really like if you want to use super heavy samurai, literally, I think there's one spell that most people like to have in there. And that's just about it for the entire deck. So,
That's
like,
it.
just, oh yeah, absurd. It's got some pretty awesome effects, but that's kind of the idea. But it is really important to point out just because like we've given you some decks that work fairly well, all things considered. And so even though those are particularly effective at the things that they do, um, it is important to note if you're like choosing your own deck to use, it is 1000% okay to just find something you like. If it's because you like the artwork, if it's because you like literally one monster and you just want to build around that, that is totally okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, I know for me, I love the Phantom Knights because like they're this ghostly um, warrior figure, and it's, I mean, the entire concept of what they do. I fell in love with the style over watching Yu-Gi-Oh! Arc 5, and guys, Zach primarily mains cubics, and if you watch the Yu-Gi-Oh! Dark Side of Dimensions movie, oh my gosh.
It looks so cool. Watch it. Like I just watched it last night, from time of recording this, and I got so hyped for it, Mason. I'll have to let you watch it because
Yeah, no kidding.
I got a Prime account just to do it.
That's hilarious. That is hilarious. So, guys, yeah, find something you like. Hopefully, this helped a little bit as far as better understanding, um, how the monster zones are laid out, where you can summon these monsters, where do they stay, what, what do you need to be prepared for, what kind of style fits you best. So, yeah.
Definitely. There, there's so much, and like one of my friends almost almost exclusively plays dragons because he loves dragons so much.
True. True. He's a Thunder Dragon guy.
And
And
that's
also, he hates joy. And
he hates all that is good in the world.
that's
He
right.
just wants to beat everything up. Like he plays Thunder Dragons, he plays Red Dragon Archfiends. Like he,
hmm
just because he's very much a combo player as well. And
hmm
so here recently he's picked up the Pendulum Magicians, the Endymion, and trying to salvage everything he can out of it. And
Yeah.
he can set up some stupid boards with it.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely insane. Um, but yeah, I mean, the big point to that is that, I mean, like, what he did is he found something he likes. He finds a style he likes, and just about all the decks he runs um, kind of fit that style. I personally, I like a little bit of combo, but I really like the interaction between two players. So I like finding ways to build boards, to break boards. It's all fun to me. And um, Zach, your preference on things?
Oh, I just love burning things, and it's
Yeah, watch out, future arsonist here.
nah, like with cubics, I fell in love with them just because they were actually the friend that we're talking about. He's the one that got me into Yu-Gi-Oh. It was actually last summer when, at time of recording, when about the time that he started getting me to get into it, and he said he found just a bunch of cubic cards and was like, "Dude, I am never gonna play these. I don't like the artwork. They're all yours if you want them." And I was like, "Dude, yeah, that's cool." Just because I didn't really have a deck that I was a big fan of, I loved the dragons, but I knew the ceiling only went so high with like Blue Eyes or something like that, and I was interested in having something of my very own that nobody else played, and so far I've stayed true to it, and nobody around me plays Cubics for probably obvious reasons. but but I just love it, and I fell in love with the archetype, and the fact that the big boss monster gets to burn for 3,000 at the end phase is just really fun. It makes life really exciting.
Yeah, for sure. So, yeah, guys, make sure you pick out something you like. That's what matters at the end of the day. Um, Again, hope this helped a little bit, and I think this will launch us well into better understanding the link mechanic, which we will be talking about in our next episode. Zach, anything you want to tell our listeners before we go?
Y'all get ready to hear everything I can tell you about Sky Striker and Rocket Link, because that's what links are.
Those are the only important ones. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
So
I will
next,
say, guys, sorry to interrupt, Zach. Sorry.
good.
We will hopefully be putting together a YouTube channel relatively soon, where we can go over exactly what's happening whenever we talk about these different summoning techniques, talk about different combos, or different decks to try as far as what they're trying to accomplish. Hopefully, we can get that stuff to you guys real soon.
Yeah, I'm really excited for it, and thank you guys so much for listening. Please rate, review, whatever you can do, or anything like that. Like Mason said, we're trying to get a YouTube thing going. So if you'll find us on that, when we get up there, we'll put a little announcement out saying that we did that. And come subscribe, come hang out with us. And we are always looking for new stuff to talk about, stuff that we haven't mentioned yet. And just making sure we line this up so you guys understand this game and how fun it really is as best you can and as best we can explain it to you.
For sure. All right, guys. Thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. And yeah, I think that covers everything we got.
Peace out. Much love.
Moose blood.
Play Yu-Gi-Oh! Dadgummit, Mason.